Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to start our summer 2021 kickoff with easy importing. I got a special guest, VP of Data Services, Bobby BABIS, who's going to be on here with us in 1 second. I am going to share my screen so everybody can see. Just give me 1 second here so I can make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen. How do I do this and it's not working for me? Why is this? People can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen there?
It's Outlook.
Okay, so you see Outlook, so we'll switch it over here. How's that? Is that better?
Yep.
All right, I totally forgot how to share screens on there. Looks like everybody's kind of filling up in here. I see some new names, some familiar faces. We want to do these mini series here because we want to make sure that you're able to have a quick takeaway from each one of our sessions. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be putting out this summer 2021 kickoff mini series, and we'll be discussing different topics. We'll talk about stacking plans, we'll talk about leasing, we'll talk about sales, we'll talk about virtual reality. And one of the biggest questions that we get is, can I bring data over, and how do I bring data over into the RealNex program? And that's why I wanted to have Bobby join with us. Today, if you do have the RealNex program, feel free to follow along. He's going to give you some great tips and tricks. We've added in an import wizard. However, it's not magical in the sense it's going to create a spell for you. It does help you out with that, and Bobby again is going to streamline that process. Anybody can import their data right into RealNex, and we want to show how simplified that process can be, so you can start importing data on your own. So if you want to follow along, you can just log into realnex.com. You cannot do this on your mobile app. You'd have to do it through one of the web pages at realnex.com, and this way you can import that data in. If you have any questions throughout, we're going to be answering those questions hopefully live as we go along. Bobby's been doing this for quite some time, so he's very versed with this. Also, we'll be here to answer any questions offline. We hope that you join us for other sessions coming up, and if you have any ideas for any sessions in the future, let us know. One quick house cleaning item here is we cannot hear you, but we can obviously you guys can hear us. So if you do have a question or anything else, just please put it in the questionnaire box. If we had everybody speak during this, we wouldn't be able to get everything done that we need to get done. So you are in listen only mode. You can hear us, we cannot hear you. So if you are talking, just put that right into questions box, and either Jeff or myself will try to answer that for Bobby. So Bobby, with that said, are you ready?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you, Matt.
I figured you were born ready here, and I'm going to kind of make you the presenter here. Make sure you got the presenter controls. And looks like some questions are coming in, which is great. So everybody knows that that's working. And Bobby, take it away. I'll be in the background if you need me.
All right, let's see. Show screen. This one. All right, so yeah, as Matt said, today we're going to be talking about importing data into the RealNex CRM, the bare basics of it, and this is also all basically covered under a knowledge base article that we have available for you. So I would definitely suggest each of you, if you just search for templates for CRM import in Google, it'll bring this right up along with our entire knowledge base. But I'll be using files directly from this, and it's basically going to also give you a text version of what I'm talking about. I'll talk about a few things outside of the scope of this. Is sometimes it's a lot easier to show your screen and do everything in the moment than it is to capture everything in a neat text file. So there'll be some the edge case type of things that might come up as well. But yeah, this knowledge base article, I would suggest all of you look at this, and I assume we can send a link to everybody at the end of the webinar, correct?
Yeah, everybody will have a link, and then also everything's going to be recorded on our YouTube video. So Bobby, maybe at the end you can kind of show them where our YouTube videos are at, and then where they can access it. And
then I'll also make sure that this knowledge base article is in the description on there as well.
Fantastic.
But that is absolutely a great point, and we'll make sure that RealNex's YouTube, we'll go there, and but all of you should definitely take a look at that, as all of our past webinars are set up there. But we'll talk about that again a little bit later as well, and just kind of try to stay on topic here. So importing data into the CRM. most of the time that's going to be, you get a spreadsheet of information and it's either going to be contacts or properties and contacts. Those are the most common scenarios. There are some other types of imports that can happen into RealNex. And if you go to tools and import, you'll see the different types. Contacts brings in the people as well as the companies that those people are associated with. Companies are just companies. Properties brings in the property record as well as the ownership, whether that's a contact or a company or a combination of both. Spaces are the leasable spaces within the properties, so it imports the actual space record, the tenant that is leasing that space if applicable, as well as all of the lease details, the property that that space resides in, and the owner of that property if your spreadsheet also goes that deep. Sale comps import the actual sale comparable records, projects, and then units are for multifamily unit mixes. So if you have a spreadsheet that includes all of the different unit mixes for your multifamily buildings, you can import that in using units, which also imports like a properties import, where it'll be able to capture the ownership for the properties as well. Today, we're going to be talking about properties, though, as that's the most common type of import. And honestly, if you understand how to import properties, most everything's going to ultimately make sense. It either just becomes more complex because there's more records being linked, or less complex because there's fewer records being linked, like in contacts or companies. So we'll talk about properties, but this will absolutely apply to basically any type of import you'll be doing in the system. And I'm sure you'll all be familiar with spreadsheets that look roughly like this. So this is what we're going to be using to import into the RealNex CRM today. And so we've got 7 different properties here. And as you glance through, you can also tell that we have the same ownership multiple times, which absolutely is extremely common when you have like exports of data from different data sources like title companies, apartment directories, or however you're getting your spreadsheets that include this sort of information. Now, the way that the RealNex import works is it's set to where each of these properties are going to import into the database. And then in the instance here, like where we have Charlie Tuna, who owns 3 of these buildings, we're going to end up with 1 copy of Charlie Tuna at the end of this, linked to Las Brisas Shopping Center, Balboa Office Park, and Santan Village. So our journey today is going to basically take us from this spreadsheet into having these records in RealNex. And the number of records your spreadsheet has really doesn't make it more or less complicated. So I just work with a small set of data, so it's quick. We can see the results of the import really quickly. But if you have a few thousand records, the process is exactly the same. It's just going to take a little bit longer for the records to import. Like 2,000 properties generally takes under 10 minutes. I mean, there's sometimes if a lot of people are importing simultaneously that can get higher, but generally speaking, you're looking at 10 to 15 minutes for your average import to be finished. With 7 records, it usually takes around 30 seconds to 90 seconds, somewhere in there. But you see, we have the basic property details as well as the ownership information captured on the spreadsheet. And so on the knowledge base article that I showed you, the AutoMap templates, there are 4 different files that are templates for RealNex. The way that the importer in RealNex works is it will read the column headers of your spreadsheet, and if they match the names of the fields in RealNex, it will auto-map the fields for you, making it to where at the end of the day, once your spreadsheet is set up, the import process ends up being a couple of clicks. And the huge benefit of that is once you've got your spreadsheet all set up, each and every time you can just take your new data, put it into that same format, and have a import done in, I think it's ultimately like 7 or 8 clicks, but most of the time you're just clicking next. So that's the ultimate goal of this process. So generally, these are all going to be fairly standard names, property name, address. Those are all going to match perfectly, but some terminology is going to be a little bit different depending on, which market you're in, what type of real estate you're dealing in, or just what we decided was the name of that field so long ago. So like, for example, looking at the spreadsheet, a few of these just from knowledge I can see don't match up exactly with what's in the database. So ultimately, what you'll do is download the template file where the top row is all of the different column names that our system is expecting. So if you're importing data and it looks like this, with the property name column being called property name, building size size being BLDG size. And some of these aren't as strict, like building size. You can actually type out building. You can type in square feet, SQFT. It's going to recognize a number of different options that are there for those. So like most of the more common ones are going to work like that, but generally it's a good idea just to use what's in this template, as then you'll know that it's 100% going to match up. And so a few different ways you can go about it. You can either start taking the information in here. So we've got the property name. We can take the property name and put it into the property name column in here. And just going left to right, make sure each of these has a home. Address, city, state, and zip code, and so on down the line. Alternatively, you can also go through and see if they match and copy the other way around. So, for example, we want building size to be whatever square feet is in here, which is right there. We could just do it like that. So whichever way you find easier is definitely the way to go. I've never really found an answer to which one is the absolute easiest. Generally, I just keep the two open and do one or the other, or just manually type it using the other one as reference. So this is a process where it's a lot nicer to have two monitors set up side by side, or one nice big ultra wide where you can put the spreadsheets next to each other and just kind of eyeball it, make sure all of your fields match. Although if everything doesn't match perfectly, you can, of course, then map the fields that didn't match up manually, which I'll show you through that process as well. But eventually, you are going to have a spreadsheet that will then look like this, where all of the different column names are changed.
Hey, Bobby, where do you download these templates at? I always have a hard time finding them. And, you know, for myself, I've used the system quite often, and it doesn't look like they're highlighted. We should probably change that. It's almost a stagnant color.
What, the blue?
Yeah, so go to contacts for me real quick. No, inside of your CRM.
Yeah.
You were there. How do you do that, man? So go to tools import, and then click on contacts. And then right there, see where it says CSVXLS? I don't ever really notice that. I wonder if we should change the color to a red or something like that. But that was one of the questions that's coming in right now is, where do I download these templates? This is awesome. But where do I even download them? And that's where you download them. And same thing's going to be for what property. It's all the same, right, Bobby, in there? But it's going to be different.
Yeah, the ones that I provided here are just a little bit pared down. So, I mean, this one's nice because it has a lot fewer fields, the most common fields one. If you actually download the properties one, there's something like 150 different fields, because, I mean, you can import into literally every single field in the CRM database. And when you go over to properties, there are a lot of them. So this was actually created specifically in response to the fact that those files end up being a lot of work to navigate through, at least for properties. For contacts, the one that's up there works generally perfectly fine. But if you look at this one right here is the equivalent, the all fields. This is what you end up downloading when you get that file. Not this one. So it goes through column FU, which that would be BABIS. So yeah, 149 fields plus or minus some. So yeah, you absolutely can download those there, and just what I would suggest is first deleting a lot of the fields if you download it directly from the import tool, if you're using it for properties. If you're using it for contacts, you're absolutely fine doing that, as there's not nearly as many fields needed for that. But I agree, Matt, we could definitely highlight that a little bit more, as no one ever actually notices that that section when going through there. Because, I mean, I think it's actually more due to the fact that it's on the first page where you mindlessly browse through your file and don't necessarily read what's going on, because we all know what a file browse is for. We understand we're doing an import. So this is probably the page where you don't really have any questions generally.
Yeah, and then also that help there with the video, maybe we can figure out a way to highlight that or have it automatically open up or something, because a lot of people aren't seeing that video, and that video is great. Now, I think you have a better voice than Tim does, but it's a fantastic way to be able to pull that up in a smaller screen as well to kind of walk through it. My only recommendation is don't drink too much coffee before you do this, and it's going to be a lot easier for you.
I've had the exact opposite experience myself, but I mean, you do you. Let's see. Okay, so we've got our file now that has each of the different fields all mapped out. The names are all set up. And then we've also noticed that we should ultimately end up with fewer contacts than we have properties. So I've got a mostly blank database. It's just one property, one contact in it right now. And so we'll import into here using tools, import, and properties. When you click on that, again, you can always download those spreadsheets directly from here or the pared down versions from the knowledge base article. But the first step is to browse for your file. So we're going to find the ready for upload. Now, generally, I would suggest if you're doing a data import for the first time with a new set of data, the first thing I would do is take a smaller set of data that actually looks about like 5 to 10 records anywhere in there, and just import that smaller subset of information first so you can see how everything is going to look. It's the database equivalent of measure twice, cut once. Because if you start an import, there's not the ability to stop the import. And if you're importing like 10,000 records, first off, it can take, an hour to an hour and a half with, very large imports to be able to have the import finish where you can start deleting those records. Also, deleting 10,000 records, if there's a mistake on them, is going to take quite a while as well. Although generally you can also import and use the import to update the information, depending on what went awry. But as the import isn't just a way to import new information, but also to update information. But generally, always take a smaller set of the information, import that first, make sure everything looks good, and then import the larger set of data. It'll take, an extra 5 minutes or so in order to do that, but the amount of time that you end up saving if anything does go wrong, and honestly, the import is a complicated process. There's a lot of things, especially when we hit next and go to the next screen, it'll probably make it obvious why things can, easily go wrong. When you hit auto map, it's going to take care of all of that mapping for you. So that's where I talked about where we renamed the columns to make sure that they matched with the CRM. Now all of these fields just automatically map for us. So we've got the property name, address, city, state, and zip. I'll talk about these check marks in a second. And then it's separated into these different sections. So you can definitely see here how it can be fairly complicated, and you can easily, inadvertently miss something looking at this. So, like Matt said, I've done this for a long time. I still import small sets of data first every single time, as it can take hours sometimes to unravel things, especially if you're working in a database that you already have data in. Like I said, the import can update information in your CRM as well. So a lot of people will, take yearly exports of sales transactions in their region and import that information. A lot of those properties are going to be in the system already, and you don't want to end up creating duplicates, although we do have a fantastic duplicate merge function in the CRM, and I ultimately use it a lot more than I ever thought I would, as it actually, I've worked with a lot of different CRMs, and I've actually not found a better duplicate merge function so far working with them. It just works very easily, very quickly, and gets rid of everything. But still, any steps that you don't want to do or don't have to do, it's great to not have to do them. So everything mapped here, and we can kind of just go through and check the fields. I did that prior to this. I actually imported this into a different database. So everything came in perfectly. Now, the next thing to talk about are these checkboxes that say Dupe Key. Well, they're kind of a little offset, but that's what these checkboxes are. They're saying this field, use it as a dupe key. And what dupe key means, it stands for duplicate key. And every row that gets imported into RealNex, it'll check these fields that are checked. So the property name, address, city, state, and zip code for the property. It'll check to see if there's already a record with all 5 of those fields matching exactly. So if we look at our spreadsheet, basically, if these 5 fields match all of the same information for another record in our spreadsheet or one of the records in our CRM, at that point, it will recognize that the record already exists in the database. And that's where the other column comes in, update rule. For all of the fields that you don't have marked as Dupe Key, like let's say market or property type, square footage, or like transaction price is something that even if the database or properties in your database, oftentimes that'll be updated over the course of time. And what this is saying is update that field if there's a blank value in there. For something like transaction price, though, oftentimes you'll actually want to come in here and set that to always update the transaction price. So again, every row that gets imported from your spreadsheet, it'll check to see if all of the Dupe Key fields match another record in your database. And then if it does, for all of the other fields that aren't marked as Dupe Key, it'll then check to see, or it'll then either update them if they're blank or always update them. And then owners actually work a little bit separately, especially due to the fact that when you do your initial data import, you're probably not going to have duplicate properties most of the time, but 90% of the time you will have duplicate contacts because one person often will own the same building or multiple buildings in the same spreadsheet. So this actually works separately from the property. So it'll check to see if the property record exists in the database. Then it'll go to the owner fields and see if the full name, first name, last name, company name, address, city, and state all match a contact in your database. If it does, then it'll update the information based on what you have set for these fields. But more importantly, if that contact does exist, it'll then link whichever property is in that row to that owner. So one person owns 3 properties, they'll be imported one time, and all 3 properties will be linked to that one person, like we saw with Charlie Tuna. And so we'll see that happen in a moment. Now you can play with these Dupe Keys sometimes, like sometimes you might not necessarily want the company name checked for duplicates or the address itself, but these are just the default Dupe Key fields that get marked. And if you don't really have any specific reason to change them, then they're usually going to be your best bet is going to be the ones that default when hitting auto map. If you're manually mapping fields by coming in here and dropping down and selecting the field, you'll need to do that yourself. And so the fields that are most commonly used for that, for the property, are going to be the building address, property name, although that one does change over the course of time. So I've seen a lot of people not necessarily want to use the property name. But generally, the address never changes, the city, the state. So those are good fields to use as a duplicate key, as well as parcel number. Parcel number is kind of the exact definition of that sort of thing, because it's a series of letters and numbers that define a property. But oftentimes you don't have parcel numbers in your spreadsheet, or they're not 100% consistently filled in which case addresses are your safest bet. So once you've got all the fields mapped here, the next step is to hit next. So on this screen, you have an option to import it either as yourself or as one of the other users on your team. So if an admin is importing this information for one of the agents in the office, they can put these records in and have them all owned by that agent. You can also set which team these records are visible for. So teams basically letting you set privacy settings for each record. So this allows you to import information just to like private to yourself. So if you're on a team, this can actually be a good way to, if you don't necessarily want everybody to see that information right away until you've actually looked through it and cleaned it up a bit, a lot of the times people will change the team on those to private. And then once they've cleaned them up, use a global replace to reset that. And then you can also have these records go into a group in your system, either an existing group, or in this case, I'm going to create a new group and call it webinar import. And then the type, since we're importing properties and contacts and companies, I'm actually going to set the type to all, so keep it as it is. That way the properties, contacts, and companies all become a part of that group. Hit save, and then next one more time. And so this is going to give you a synopsis of your import. It's going to show you which fields are being used for duplicate checking. So this is basically highlighting the fields that were marked as Dupe Key. So you have one last chance to quickly, in one place, see all of those settings and see if anything looks wrong. And you can see actually the contacts and companies check for duplicates differently. So if you have two different people, like John Smith and Sally Jones at ABC Company, you'll end up with one company, and then John Smith and Sally Jones will each be separate contact records at that company. And then, of course, any properties that they own will be under the appropriate contact, either Sally or John. Shows you how many records are going to be imported, which sometimes that's actually a really good thing to glance at, because I've seen spreadsheets where you know, the first 500 records are very obvious, but then there's like 1,500 blanks and then another set of random stuff at the bottom. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that number. Just make sure it looks roughly like what the number you're looking to import is. And then finally, hit finish, and it's going to congratulate you at this point. You should definitely pat yourself on the back, as this is honestly one of the more, I guess, complicated things that there is to do in the CRM. So once you've got the hang of this, most everything in the CRM is generally easier to grasp than this, as importing ends up kind of utilizing a different style of what we do on a day-to-day basis. One second here. Yeah, so the screen's also telling you you'll be notified when it's finished, and either via email, or if you've got your notification settings set, you'll also get a notification in here letting you know that the CRM data was imported. So we should, I think that's from this import. Yeah, it should be. We should now have those properties imported into the system, which we now see here. And then if we bring it out into split screen here, go to one of these properties owned by Charlie Tuna, you click that and it'll open up in a new tab for us. When we go to the link section on Charlie, we'll see all three of those different properties all coming up under one contact record. So that's probably the most common question, is how to make that happen. And the dupe keys are what made that occur, making sure that every time it imported a record, it was checking to see if the owner already existed in the database. So it imported the second row, third row, fourth row, and each time it was checking to see if that contact is already in the system. And I mean, that's the basics of importing, about as simplified as I generally tend to see. I mean, honestly, contacts are way simpler than that, as really you're just dealing with people's names, addresses, company names, and phone numbers. But properties are by far the most common way I see people importing data.
Bobby, you're making this look too easy, and it's uploading everything, linking it, everything. So remember, everybody, if you have questions during this, we're trying to answer them as we go through, and everybody so far has been pretty excited. And the stuff and comments that I'm getting in here is you're answering them as they go. So so far it's been fantastic. And like Bobby said, importing contacts is relatively easy. So if you use any kind of scraping software to grab some contact records or anything else, you can easily import that information in. And then if you're importing properties, remember with our mobile app, if you're out in the field, you can take one of those properties you've imported and you can hit edit, and you can start taking pictures and add pictures to it. Because people ask me, where do you get the pictures? Well, you can import the property records and then go right to the property when you're out in the field on a tour, walking the property or anything else, hit edit. And if Bobby did this on his phone, he'd actually be able to put in there, oh, there you go. So Queen Creek Marketplace, Bobby can just add with his phone, and he can add the information in. You can take multiple pictures and it dumps it right into the program. And it's a great way to have a reference point when you're out calling on a property, and then it maps it as well. So if Bobby clicks that little map button right there next to the trail, the word trail, you'll actually see the information on the map, pull a little Google person over, and it's a fantastic way to build your farm out. And if you're on a team, you can assign these properties to different people on your team and so forth. Anybody have any additional questions? We wanted to make this quick and easy, Bobby, and you sure did with that. Remember, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a support button. So if you do have questions or you need support, there's a guide me to walk you through any of the other aspects of the program. And again, we're here to help you. If you are like some of the other brokers out there and you're just way too busy to do it, You can go ahead and you can click the support button, click book now, click on advance, and you can book a session with Bobby, and he can give you a scope what it would cost for us to go ahead and do it for you. We encourage you to do it yourself, but if you're like, hey, look, I'm just way too busy, I want to hire Bobby to do the import for me, I want to know what it's going to cost, it's no obligation, it's a free estimate, and then we guarantee the work to be done and done correctly for you. So anybody else has any questions?
And that also handles more complex importing scenarios as well, where people might have like history records of the notes that they've kept on their contacts they want to import in, things that we don't have basic importers for. File attachments, if you're coming from an old database system and you want to like bring in all of your contacts, the photos you've already taken, we can also do that in data services.
Yeah, so if you have a Salesforce system, or your friends do, or anybody else, and they want to come into RealNex, we can convert all the data from any system out there. And some of the systems, i.e. Salesforce, we're bringing the pictures across, we're bringing the attachments. And I say we because Bobby and I are friends. I'm absolutely have no involvement in any of this stuff. I know how to import, but I can't do all that fancy stuff like Bobby can. Jeff, do we have any more questions or anything else? Or do we want to wrap this up and let everybody go back to winning deals? Jeff's probably.
Well, we did want to definitely make sure that we mentioned the YouTube channel, right? I did say we'd come back to that. So, okay, I'm not going to have YouTube randomly come up with suggestions. It's an embarrassing amount of children's programming.
Yeah, I use the kids YouTube app. That's been fantastic for the kids there, but I don't do it through the web.
Oh,
yeah,
I do as well. But it ends up bleeding in to where I'm subscribed to Pink Fong and Super Simple songs.
I can see you rocking out the Pink Fong there. I can see some other people on this call doing the same thing. Wink, wink, Greg. So look, I'm glad you guys came on. There's the Navigator stuff in here. You can chart your course with that. And by charting course, we're going to have all these videos in there. You can see the video maker. You'll see examples of the video maker. You'll see the virtual tours in there. Did you knows? You'll see the stuff from Tim that he put all the updates in there. And we'll continue to do these mini series. I think that something that's digestible that you can take away and have a takeaway every single time. That's an incredible amount of videos. Is going to be the best. Yeah.
Well, I was also going to point out, if they miss my voice, they can always click on these blue ones to, have a little moment with me.
Yeah, a little brunch with Bobby. So look, thanks everybody for coming on. We've had a fantastic attendance, fantastic questions. We appreciate your business. And like always, we'll see you around. And if you need anything, let us know. Thanks everybody and have a great week. Bye.
Take care all.